Some clouds appear light and fluffy, others dark and menacing. But are all clouds made of bacteria? Clouds contain dust and ice crystals and other atmospheric debris. But they also contain bacteria and other microscopic organisms. Scientists have done lab experiments showing that microbes can act as ice nuclei. And for a while scientists have suspected that microorganisms swept into the atmosphere end up as parts of clouds. Now, thanks to an airborne mass spectrometer, an instrument that identifies the presence of elements and molecules, scientists know that clouds contain bacteria. In fact, they found that clouds are about a third biological material. Does this mean that clouds are somehow alive? Not necessarily, because it's not yet clear if the microbes in clouds are living or dead. What scientists do know is that the discovery will help develop new climate models. The more we know about how clouds form and what's in them, the better we can understand their effect on climate and weather patterns. Clouds radiate sunlight back into space and also trap heat on Earth. And, of course, clouds produce rain. Knowing that clouds harbor biological material adds another piece to the puzzle of how clouds work and how they affect life on Earth. Human activities, such as burning fossil fuels, are warming Earth's climate. The climate crisis has widespread ramifications. Ecologists are worried that many species will become extinct, because they might not be able to adapt to a climate change that's faster than most naturally occurring ones. It's possible that some plants and animals could adapt by shifting their habitats towards Earth's poles, or towards higher elevations, to avoid the heat. Since ecosystems are varied and complex, ecologists can only find out by studying many specific cases. A team of American ecologists explored this possibility for a species of hummingbirds native to North America's west coast, called Anna's hummingbird. The researchers published their findings in 2022. Anna's hummingbirds live in California's lowlands, but migrate upslope into the cooler mountains during the summer. If climate warming continues, the team hypothesized, the birds might adapt by migrating farther up. To test whether this was really possible, the researchers studied the effects of relocating a group of Anna's hummingbirds to a higher altitude. They captured the birds from across their normal range in the Sierra Nevada, and moved them to a research station near a mountain peak, 4,000 feet higher than the birds normally venture. They found that the hummingbirds had big difficulties adapting to the lower air pressure and oxygen levels, which caused a drop in their metabolic rate and flight efficiency. Although the researchers still want to study the effects of longer exposure, their tentative conclusion was that it would be hard for the birds to adapt. Their results remind us how complicated an animal's environmental requirements are. You may not know much, if anything, about Jean-Jacques Rousseau, but you have probably heard the well-known quote, "Man is born free, and everywhere he is in chains." In his early work, Rousseau argued that mankind was happiest and at its best in a state of nature, that is, before the creation of society and civilization. He saw society as artificial and corrupt, and that good people were corrupted by it. The Social Contract is perhaps the most enduring and well-known of his books, covering pretty well every aspect of man and society. However, in this book, his attitude to the condition of man in a state of nature changes. In such conditions, man is brutish and competitive by nature. And there is no law or morality. Therefore, because it is easier to survive by joining forces with others, people form societies to better fight anything that might endanger their situation. Rousseau's political philosophy has had a profound influence on later thinkers, even though, or perhaps especially because, it is open to many interpretations. But political philosophy is not everybody's cup of tea. In his own time, Rousseau was a bestseller, with novels such as The New Heloise and, especially, Émile, though even the latter is not free of his constant desire to improve society. It illustrates his ideas about the best form of education, which involves educating a child's emotions before their reason. This too had a profound influence on educational theorists.
Both men and women gained weight, but when it came to race, black women had the most rapid weight gain, followed by white women and then black and white men. The weight gain was just a few pounds, but even a slightly higher BMI is associated with weight-related health issues. Several reasons exist for the weight discrepancy between the single and married people. For example, married men and women may be less concerned about their body weight because they're no longer actively seeking a mate. Plus, married people have a regular dining partner, possibly leading to more meals. On the single side, those who are widowed or have gone through a divorce may lose weight due to stress. So while this news may not be good for the smug marrieds, it may be welcomed by Bridget Jones. The single, and very weight-conscious, Jones may actually have had the easier path to staying thin than her married friends.
When it came to fund selection, she found there were significant differences based on gender. Men are more likely to invest in aggressive and growth funds, while women are more likely to choose conservative funds. Males are risk takers, whether it's in their choice of car or their investment fund, she says. But when it comes to long-term savings, risk-taking can actually be an advantage. Dr. Matthews also found that men are more likely than women to have prior savings when joining KiwiSaver. Just over half of male respondents said they had savings already, while only 38% of women did. These figures reflect and confirm, quite disappointingly, the difference between males and females and the level of interest they take in financial planning, Dr. Matthews says.
The decline has been attributed to inconsistent product quality and poor customer service. Although the chain tends to throw advertising dollars at the problem, an understanding of integrated marketing communication theory would suggest that internal management problems, 19 CEOs in 50 years, need to be rectified before a unified, long-term strategy can be put in place. The importance of consistency in brand image and messages, at all levels of communication, has become a basic tenet of IMC theory and practice. The person who takes the customer's order must communicate the same message as Burger King's famous tagline, "Have it your way," or the customer will just buzz up the highway to a chain restaurant that seems more consistent and, therefore, more reliable.
Good evening, ma'am. How can I help you?
Good evening. Can you please show me the food menu card?
Yes, ma'am. Are you veg or non-veg?
Non-veg.
Here is your menu, ma'am. Please take a look and tell me what you would like to have.
How is your grilled chicken? Is that okay?
Yes, ma'am. We have really good quality chicken and we are quite famous here for grilled chicken. I am sure you will love it. Should I go for it, ma'am?
Okay. Half grilled chicken with 2 buttered bread.
My best piece of advice would be to join like-minded groups. So, for example, if you're into dance, join a dance group. And you can find a lot of these on, something like Meetup or some sort of app. But you want to find groups that are similar to you. And then you can build a friendship from there, because typically, if you're interested in something, those might be those type of people that you want to build a friendship with. One of my favorite quotes from Maya Angelou I think can apply to friendships. When someone shows you who they are, believe them the first time. So when you're building friendships with people, they're going to show you initially who they are. So trust that. And I'm a big proponent of trusting your instincts and investing in friendships that make you feel comfortable from the outset.
In his great novel Remembrance of Things Past or In Search of Lost Time, Marcel Proust explored what are called involuntary memories, those that come to us quite suddenly without conscious effort, usually triggered by one of the senses. The fact that his book has two titles in English might suggest there is some doubt as to how our minds go about remembering things. In perhaps the most well-known such episode in the novel, the character Marcel is reminded of his childhood by the aroma produced when dunking a cake in a cup of tea. This is not far away from the belief that as we get older we can remember quite clearly incidents from years ago, but find it hard to remember what we did last week. Proust's insight into memory is certainly true of one way the mind works. But why and how do we remember what we do? Experts believe that we store memories in three ways. First, there is the sensory stage, which is to do with perception and lasts only a fraction of a second, taking in sight, sound, touch, and so on. These first perceptions and sensations are then stored in the short-term memory, which is the second stage. Finally, important information or information that has been reinforced by, for example, repetition, is then filtered into the long-term memory. Naturally, we tend to more easily absorb material on things we already know something about, as this has more meaning for us and can create a web of connections with related material that is already stored in the long-term memory.
How would you define reasonable as it is used in law? For example, you are allowed to use reasonable force when defending yourself. It seems to depend on how serious the situation was, whether it was possible to resolve it by peaceful means, whether you were ready to try those means, and, finally, the relative strengths of those involved. Now, most men know, and they've probably grasped this from their earliest years in the school playground, that, when it comes to blows, fights don't stop until one of you is in no shape to do any damage to the other. The criteria mentioned seem a bit fuzzy to me. How can you convince a jury you were ready to try and talk your way out of it when the other person would have none of it and, besides, he was quick to land the first punch? Also, you can strike the first blow and still plead self-defense. Of course, you again have the problem of convincing people that the threat was so great that you had no alternative, apart from getting beaten up yourself. Reacting calmly and rationally to a perceived threat is not easy to do.
The basic English person's diet in medieval times was made up of bread, cheese, and beef, while ale was the drink for all ages and social classes except for the aristocracy, who drank wine. In winter there were no root crops to feed the animals, so they were killed in autumn and the meat salted to preserve it. People kept livestock even in the towns. Cows were usually kept tied or tethered, but pigs were allowed to wander at will, feeding on the rubbish off the streets. By the 16th century, however, choice in foodstuffs had grown, including exotic spices, to add flavor to the usual diet. This had come about because European rulers wanting to increase their power and wealth and also, in fairness, in the spirit of inquiry and the quest for knowledge, had financed voyages of exploration overseas. This opened up trade routes, bringing precious spices and vast profits from the east, and to the west Spanish and Portuguese explorers had brought back such novelties as potatoes, tomatoes, maize, peppers, and chocolate. It must be said, though, that it took people some time to accept some of these new foods, as they feared they were poisonous. Why is lying to ourselves a problem? We need to tell ourselves the truth when we can, for the simple reason that we often pay a very high price for the short-term calm of our lives. We miss key opportunities for growth and learning. We're not very nice to be around. We develop harmful systems. And not least, the truth will out. When we don't let it emerge, it has a tendency to reveal itself through involuntary, often physical symptoms. We become insomniac or impotent. An eyelid starts twitching. We acquire a stutter and scream in our sleep and lose energy. We fall into depression. We owe it to ourselves to dare to start to confront
If Wikipedia had been around a couple hundred years ago, we probably would have had an article that says that the sun revolves around the earth, because that was what we understood to be true. We no longer understand that to be true thanks to advances in science and physics. But if tomorrow we were to wake up and learn that in fact time being relative really does upend the way that we think about the world, Wikipedia would have to evolve in order to describe that. So we're not really in the business of truth or facts, we're in the business of what is known, and what has been determined through consensus, scientific consensus or otherwise. And I think that that actually provides some clarity on how to understand what information you're looking at. One thing that I think is really unique about Wikipedia is there's only one version for the whole public. There's no feed that's curated for you or for me. We all are looking at. The female spider can choose when to cut off intimate relations by eating her partner or kicking him out. This dynamic has led males to an unlikely strategy to make sure they have some say in the matter: self-castration. Males are able to leave part or all of their organ inside of a female, which decreases the odds the female will be able to mate again. But new research shows that when a male leaves his whole kit and caboodle behind, his likelihood of fathering the next batch of eggs is much higher. Why? His parting gift keeps on giving, even after he is gone. This remote copulation technique actually boosts the amount and speed of sperm transferred to the female. The behavior is described in the journal Biology Letters. So for these unlucky fellas, it is better to have loved and lost.
It would be useless as human birth control, of course, but the difference is that most female insects completely change their behavior after sex. For example, some mosquitoes suck blood. Others lose interest in males and start laying eggs. What's behind this dramatic change in behavior? Turns out it's a peptide in the male's seminal fluid. And now researchers in Vienna have found the female's receptor for this peptide. They report online in Nature that fruit flies without the receptor lay many fewer eggs and continue to be interested in sex. In other words, they act, so back to pest control. Most female insects should have this sort of receptor, including the kinds that spread disease and devastate crops. If we could deactivate it on a large scale, instead of fighting egg-laying bloodsuckers, we could live in peace with born-again virgins.
The cafeteria menu includes a selection of dishes, fish and chicken alike. The cafeteria menu includes a selection of dishes, fish and chicken alike. Students must wear protective clothing provided in the medical laboratory. Students must wear protective clothing provided in the medical laboratory. Important details from the argument are missing from the summary. Important details from the argument are missing from the summary. The economic strength of early Roman Republic will be examined. The economic strength of early Roman Republic will be examined.